I guess now I feel like I have the art career or art practice rather, that suits me. It's not conventional.
I'm Kate Brown, and this is The Art Angle, a podcast from ArtNet News. Kim Gordon, artist, musician, filmmaker, writer, and co-founder of the iconic rock band Sonic Youth, is one of the most restlessly creative figures in American culture. Over the past 4 decades, Gordon's established herself as a singular voice, and she has moved between mediums with an ease that few can achieve. She published her memoir, Girl in a Band, in 2015 to wide acclaim. Her visual work has been shown at institutions including the Andy Warhol Museum, the Irish Museum of Modern Art, and the Busan Biennial. And her 2024 album, The Collective, earned her 2 Grammy nominations. It's a record built on trap beats and sharp cultural commentary. She was 71. But Gordon's always identified as an artist first. She's the subject of 2 concurrent exhibitions opening this month at the arts organization Amont in Brooklyn. The first is her solo survey called Count Your Chickens, which brings together painting, ceramics, film, and ready-mades spanning nearly 20 years of work. The second is called Folded Group, and it's a group show she co-curated with Bill Nace, her collaborator in the experimental guitar duo Bodyhead. Folded Group features 19 artist-musicians who, like Gordon, have never really accepted the boundary between making art and making music. Her third solo album, Play Me, is also dropping, and it's a work of art unto itself. And on top of that, she's about to head out on tour. Gordon joins me to discuss her artwork, her feelings about the art world and the music world, and where these universes diverge and what they share. We talk about album art and how the internet has changed what it means to make and disseminate visual work. Gordon also shares what it is meant to spend a career on the edge of every category and genre that people have tried to put her in. Hey, Kim, how's it going? It's so nice to have you on the show.
Thanks for having me.
I'm such a great fan of yours, so it's truly a pleasure to be able to talk to you today. Where am I finding you right now?
I'm in Los Angeles at my house.
And you must be deep in the middle of getting everything lined up for not only one solo show, but a group show and then your album launch. How are you managing with 3 big projects simultaneously?
Yeah, it's been busy. I mean, I also rehearsing to go on tour, learning the new songs. And so after I come back from the opening and the installation, I'm jumping right back into rehearsal.
Right. And your tour starts in April, is that right?
Yeah, the first show's here, April 2nd, and then we fly to Europe April 9th. It's just a 10-day tour, but it's just learning the songs.
Yeah, for sure. It's an intense schedule. Well, I loved the new album. I was listening to it. It's really a diverse array of things, but we're going to talk about that a little bit today and about the 2 shows. But first, I wanted to just ask you, I'm curious, given the multitude of fronts in your practice, like what is a day in your studio like? Where do you like to work, or how do you alternate between things?
Well, I only go to my studio if I'm working on visual art, which actually I haven't been to my studio working in quite a while because of the record. And the work for a month's been done for a while. So, it just depends on what's going on, deadline wise yeah.
So you often have said in other interviews and, also in your memoir, Girl in a Band, that you never really thought of yourself as a musician specifically, but as an artist who also makes music. And I always really appreciated the way you rejected being pigeonholed into a category of creative pursuit or even a genre. I was listening to another interview with you, and someone had said to you, you're like a genre unto yourself. And I really agree with that statement. And, I was thinking about the group show Folded Group and how it brings together artists who, akin to you, have practices that live in more than one world simultaneously, and that they seem to come out of the same sensibility as you have in your practice. And so, I wondered about that. Like, is that part of what drew you to curating this exhibition, being around artists for whom that division between, as it says, like stage and studio is not so strict?
I guess so. I don't know. I just thought it would be a nice adjunct to the show. Bill Nace, who's my partner in this and also in the improv duo we have, Bodyhead, Yeah, I've seen him like over the years making drawings and there's actually just the whole like for a lot of the musicians in the show who are primarily musicians, like making posters and ephemeron, all that is also like a kind of a huge sort of almost subculture of art making, I suppose, and music making. But I don't know, I just thought it would be kind of, cool.
And then you are also in this solo exhibition that's titled Count Your Chickens. And, you described it in the press text as being about how intimacy and the private experience come out into a public address. And that's really struck me because you have said in other forums that, you're quite shy. And that feels like there's a thread that I've sort of detected observing and enjoying your work over the years that you sort of have always had to deal with this private and public self. And, you have described yourself, as I just said, as shy and sensitive. And it made me wonder, is it easier to stand on a stage behind your guitar, in the noise and as the sort of live setting than it is to stand at an opening in front of your artworks? Or are they different experiences fundamentally as an artist?
Yeah, sure, of course. When you have an art show, it's like the work's kind of silent or something.
Hmm.
But I don't know. I mean, I also just I'm interested in like how advertising uses like the idea of intimacy as like ad copy, or it's not per se about myself, like being a shy person. It's just an interest in like how privacy functions and is used in the public sphere, you know.
Can you expand on the idea of intimacy and ad copy?
Oh, I don't know. It's just like you can be walking off an airplane down one of those, the walkway, and there'll be ads, and there'll be an ad that's has a line that's like abstract poetry. It's implying like some intimate moment, and it's an ad for travel or, something. When I first had a band with these two girls in 1980, I used to make up lyrics from magazine ad copy. So I've always actually had that interest, I guess. I just think it's funny, like how like something can read as both a line of abstract poetry and an advertisement.
In your solo exhibition, you have this film work, Janetta and Alex, that also deals with intimacy quite directly.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's a film of two people with guitars who never met each other, who never played guitar, who kind of meet in the middle of the space, and they kind of get sounds from the guitars by bumping into each other and kind of interacting physically. And it seems very intimate. And there is something actually very intimate about making music with somebody because there is a certain amount of trust. But like on the one hand, it's a way of making a sound piece, with a different set of instructions. But yeah, it does seem like it's intimate. I don't even think there's any sexual tension between them. I think there's like some awkwardness, but it's kind of interesting because you can look at it, you can experience what they're experiencing in a way just
Mm.
visually and orally.
So it's
Yeah.
about an intimacy as vulnerability more so than any kind of eroticism.
Yeah, kind of. Yeah. But some people might look at it and say, oh, that's guitar sex, because there is something inherent about the guitar that's, phallic, and electricity movement affects the sounds you get with the guitar plugged in to an amplifier, having electrical aspects, and the way you turn your body can affect it and different things. So it's very visceral, it's very physical. So it's a question of like, what is beyond that physical? You just still don't really know what they're feeling. You don't really know what's going on. And then are they actually performing, or are they just being real in the moment.
Hmm. And in Folded Group, there is a selection of musicians and also artists who circulate via, and I really liked this framing, like through scenes rather than institutions. And it made me think about, the early album art that you were organizing via Sonic Youth and treating the record sleeve as a curatorial statement and also, a representation of, from what I understand, was your community. And I thought maybe we could pan back to that time because I think there's like a nice thread between these two things. And just to name some examples for listeners, you included the work of Mike Kelly, who features on the 1992 album Dirty, who was not the star that he is today, and nor was Gerhard Richter, whose work Kerze was on Daydream Nation in 1988. And, I was wondering, when you look back on that and that community as it was in that moment and, those particular artists as examples, is it shocking how they rose and how the community has shifted since then at all?
Well, I mean, I wouldn't exactly say Gerhard Richter was an obscure artist. Yeah, I mean, he was
Yeah.
having quite a career even then, and so was Mike. In a way. I mean, we always thought in terms of record albums, and we still made vinyl, which is like a 12 by 12, 12 and a half scale. I mean, I always thought of them as kind of like sort of ready-mades, and then like the Gerhard Richter candle paintings were actually like this kind of the same scale as a record cover. Or, I don't know, it's just like another way to get to kind of put something out that's, with Mike's work or Marty Weber, even Raymond, into the not exactly mainstream, but mass production, just to give it more exposure. I mean, art, not just music, but there were communities of artists.
Yeah.
It's just now everything's so commercial that, it's different.
Your new album artwork, Play Me, features a lower body shot with legs in these leather shorts, and the words Play Me are scrawled on each of the thighs. How did you conceive of the artwork?
I was kind of riffing off of the idea of women using their bodies in a sexual way, but being ironic about it or cute about it. And then, reading articles by feminists, what they thought of it. So it's kind of that cross with like the Rolling Stone cover, Sticky Fingers, where it's just like a close up of the crotch of jeans, with the zipper, I don't
Right,
know
of
if you know
course.
that
That's a
record
great
cover.
reference. Yeah.
Anyway, that was just where it started, basically. And because of the title, Play Me, it seems like to fit it. But I wanted it also not to be slick, totally. I wanted it to have some kind of raw aspect to it, like a horror movie or something.
The album cover was one, very important surface with which you could communicate the music to someone before they've had the chance to put it on. And nowadays, you have multiple social media platforms. There's so many different surfaces on which you need to communicate with your audience of parts of your practice. I wonder how you think through social media in particular. And, and I want to come later to talking about tech as well, because I know that it figures into your practice and your music. But just from this perspective of being a public person, there's so many more places in which you have to like deal with that publicness.
I don't know. I don't really think about social media that much. There are people at my management that think about the clip that they're going to use for the video when they show it to me. And the thing is, it's frustrating for me because of copyright questions. You can't show a whole video. So you have to put a link up. I mean, I don't go on TikTok. So basically, I just go on Instagram and I don't really go on X. I mean, they post stuff for me on the alternative to X.
Is it Blue Sky? I think.
Yeah, Blue Sky. Yeah. But the thing is that there's no context for anything. And you can give context to things you put up, but people don't want to take the time to look at it. But like if you're listening to a song on a streaming platform, especially on Spotify, there's no information about that record. There's no context for anything, basically. You have to really search for context on the internet if you want to find out. Whereas before, I mean, it's true. The only thing you had was a record and a photo. But for some reason, that was really important. You would just try and garner as much information as you could from this one record sleeve and the inner sleeve, and you could still like project all kinds of things about the band just from looking at their photo. And if you're looking at holding something that's still, it's not like moving, it's not going to like disappear. And like, maybe this is just an old people thing, but it just sort of stays with you longer. One image can stay with you, whereas now there's so many images.
For sure. And then things also tumble out of context in really surprising ways. And one of the tracks that you made, Bye Bye, which I think was a sample that was intended for a trap star, which you ended up doing a brilliant piece with, that went viral and became a meme and slipped through the algorithm. I was thinking, about the intentionality with which you do so much of your work and whether that was a very surreal experience to see. I don't know if you paid attention, but there was all these innumerable clips.
I didn't pay that much attention to it. I mean, I thought it was kind of funny and, to be on TikTok and, those kind of things, like they don't last long, and it's like, I think it was a great song.
Yeah, for sure. And it's just interesting because the album and also your work is often in places of criticism of tech. You draw out Spotify playlists in one of your songs and shopping lists and consumerism. And then in the show, Count Your Chickens, you're using this device and working with it in the form of an artwork, the shape of the iPhone. So you seem to really want to create friction in the work and that slowness. But then, of course, it's almost like it's running up against a current that is just hard to swim against, if you know what I mean.
I mean, isn't that the goal of art?
Yeah.
To make you think about things. Tech, it has its uses to degrees, but I mean, my point is really just that people are really seduced by technology. It's new, it's sexy. And the first impulse, even, since the beginning of like stylized Airstream looks from the mid 50s, it's like, it's supposed to bring about, an improved life. It doesn't always do that. There's always like you give up something, but it's more than that now. I guess maybe since the 80s or maybe the 90s, it was just like technology just moves so much faster. But, even after World War I, I mean, people weren't like totally happy with the post-industrial life because they saw what it brought about in World War I. And then suddenly, like, everyone's working in factories and it's all about work. And, I'm just sociologically interested in the relationship between this is what's going on in the landscape,
Mm-hmm. I think with the younger generation right now, there is this rising disenchantment that wasn't there a few years ago. So maybe the tides will shift again. But you mentioned a few minutes ago this idea of permanence of holding a record and it sort of being a static thing that is relatively stable over a period of time. And I was thinking about the liner notes that Yuta Kuta made for Daydream Nation, and she's also in the group show that you're opening. And I was wondering if you could talk a bit about that friendship, because that friendship seems to span decades and you're still working together and collaborating, which I think is really fantastic.
Actually, I don't think she wrote the liner notes because when I first met Yuta, we were on a press tour, or maybe we were on tour, but she was working for Specs, and she did an interview with us when Daydream Nation came out, and she was kind of giving us a hard time about using such a bourgeois artist as Gerhard Richter. And I said, well, I see it as like a Trojan horse, it's like, it looks one way on the outside, but it's something else on the inside. So that's basically how we met. And then she moved to New York and we became friends. At some point, started doing art collaborations together.
You're right. Sorry, I should say it was in the reissue of Daydream Nation that
Oh, okay.
that she
Right. That
wrote that.
makes more
Yeah,
sense.
that because that makes more sense, of course. Yeah, and she, as you said, she had raised the question about Gerhard Richter's work because he was already a star in Germany. And decades later, also, that painting sold for $16.6 million at an auction. And as someone who's
Yeah.
also been in the art world this entire time, I wonder what you make of that, because that's quite a striking number by any measure.
Art's crazy. I don't know. It's almost like gambling.
Mm.
It is built on more than people just putting online bets on everything, like our oil price is going to go up, to such and such a number. Every people bet on, is Trump going to wear a red hat or a white hat to the service? Or it's a funny kind of capitalism.
Hmm.
Takes it out of its original, I guess, use value, the whole marketing of art.
Yeah.
I was actually paid to talk about that painting so, for the auction house.
How was that experience?
Actually, it was kind of painful, actually, questions.
Mm. The only thing that people hear about from the art world who are not in it is these incredible prices.
Right.
And there's so much more there, which,
It's true.
we both well know. And it's frustrating that that's kind of how people understand it. And it is different from music in that sense because, and this is something that I've always found a
Mhm.
little bit frustrating, is that art, you get told, that it's good and that you don't understand the canon and therefore you should appreciate this thing and that's why it's worth so much. And with music, it's different. Like it has either has a grip on people or it doesn't. And of course, there's lots of marketing that can create a cult of a personality, but a song can make someone cry, and it probably does more regularly than a painting might. I
Uh,
wonder what you think about that, or maybe you don't agree. As someone who's worked in both mediums, I wonder what you think about the sort of visceral experience of each of them.
like art world, there are many different kinds of the music world,
Hmm.
just as there are many different kinds of the art world. So I guess I just expect the music industry to be kind of horrible. It's crass and it's like, how big is your marketing budget and pushing things? And I mean, art has emotionality too. It's just that it's not as accessible. And especially in America, I think people are more afraid of art. So it's not clear what they're supposed to get out of it. Or, with music, also, it is something that from a very, young age, everyone listens to music. And when you're a teenager and in college, the music you listen to can be so formative and it can, leave quite an impression. And art could do that, but not to that extent, but like I remember as a teenager going to a show, I think it was called like Art and Technology, ironically enough. And it had Warhol had these like printed shower curtains with also like a whole row of shower heads. And there was this Bruce Nauman, his green like hallway, the narrow kind of
Yeah,
space he created. That was like that left such an impression on me. I still think about that piece. I don't know. So I mean, art really does have that, but it's just, I think if people were exposed to art starting in like elementary school, it would be different.
for sure. And there is some merit to having to work to understand something. And I think, of course, Sonic Youth, some of the first times that you hear the songs, I remember not quite maybe tapping into it. And then after a few listens to the album, it just opens up for you. And I think that that's like also the mark of something. It's the opposite of pop music sensibility, where it's just like immediately you understand what's going on and
Mhm.
it's stuck in your head all day. So,
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah. It's such different mediums, and music is much more about the body. Even classical music. I mean, it can be, it doesn't have, it's not necessarily all like heady,
Yeah.
but there is that aspect of new music, that's very like intellectual, I guess is the word.
Where do you tune into contemporary music and or contemporary art? Like, do you go to galleries often, or how do you seek inspiration?
No, I go to shows that I hear about,
Hmm.
just word of mouth, basically. People talk about stuff. I mean, I have my favorite gallery or two in LA, but that I feel like is kind of a community around it. I mean, I don't really listen to contemporary music that much. Same thing though, I'll listen to things people mention. I mean, there's so much like music from the past that can be discovered as well.
That's interesting to hear because you're also sampling, working with trap samples. So you're really working across a broad spectrum.
Well, that's like my collaborator is he's very much like kind of on the tip of whatever is happening in hip hop or
Mm.
yeah. It's just to me, it's just materials to work with.
Which you seem to be able to move through so fluidly. Is there a medium that you're working with right now that you feel particularly excited about, or do you feel like you cycle through things?
I mean, I like working with film. Yeah, I'm very excited about this new film that I did. It's maybe the fourth guitar oriented one. The other ones I co-directed with Manuela Dahl,
Hmm.
and this one I directed myself. I really love film a lot. Yeah, I like working in the medium.
That's an interesting one also because it's deeply collaborative. It's very hard to make a film by
Mhm.
yourself. So
It's
I
true.
guess it's sort of maybe has connections to working in a band, like you're vulnerable to everyone else's role, right?
Yeah, that's true. It is collaborative.
And in the studio,
Yeah.
you're kind of flying solo. Does that ever feel like a struggle?
No, actually, in the studio, I collaborate with Justin Raisin, my producer. It's a complete collaboration, but it's just collaborating with one other person as opposed to being in a band.
Yeah. Speaking of community and collaborators, we were talking about Yuta Kucha a few minutes ago, and you were also friends with Isa Genskin first. And, I
Mm.
was thinking about having female friendships in a time where it was by and large a boys' club. And I wonder to what extent you see that it still is like that. And, I also wonder because you do straddle the art world and the music world, if you see a difference in the way that, it's got these patriarchal airs, if it does at all.
Well, yeah, of course it does. I mean, I don't really think about it that much, but yes, it's there. I don't know. I've always just kind of dealt with it. It's just accepted it as I like working with limitations. I guess. I mean, I'm used to that.
That's a great way to put it. Circling back to the art world sort of at large, you had an early job as a framer at Gagosian, which I know I know gets brought up a lot, but it is such an interesting early experience to have. And I wonder how much it informed your idea of what you didn't want later as your art career picked up, because it's such a, and I don't mean anything about the gallery, but of course it's the blue chip art world is what I mean more widely, like this idea of what a successful artist's career looks like. Did you ever desire to be inside that? I know you met him a few times in different contexts over the years.
Well, first of all, when I worked for Larry as a framer, he did not have a gallery. They were these schlocky prints that he was selling in Westwood Village on Friday and Saturday night to like young women in their 20s to put on their walls. And he didn't have a gallery. And then when I moved to New York, I did work for Anita Nose, and I was a terrible receptionist. But they had this space. It was at a co-op, and they weren't allowed to have it open to the public. So it wasn't official, basically. I kind of got too close to the commercial aspect of the art world. It really turned me off, actually. But when I first moved to New York, I did think, yeah, I wanted to have a art career with a gallery and go that route. But I got involved with, I think the art world kind of freaked me out. And I was more interested in going to see no-wave bands and music, which was incredibly free. And I guess now I feel like I have the art career or art practice rather, that suits me. It's not conventional. And, like I'm not the kind of artist that goes to my studio 9 to 5 and work. I think I kind of come to terms with it.
Yeah. You've mentioned in other interviews you didn't want to be read as like another James Franco, which I interpret as someone seeing you as coming from one field that you're really well known for and then transitioning into another. Whereas, as we said at the top, like you always saw yourself as an artist. So was it frustrating having to kind of like reestablish this all the time and maybe not be understood?
Yeah, sure. Definitely a bit. I mean, the art world isn't something you could kind of slide in and out of, but I feel like I've mostly been in it. But yeah, I understand though. I mean, people mostly know me as a musician. It's just the way it is.
Mm. And when you had your first institutional solo show, which I believe was at the Andy Warhol Museum in 2019, did that feel like a relieving moment in some way? Or how was that experience of having such a big outing?
It was bizarre. I mean, it was kind of it was fun, but it was I was influenced by Warhol, and so it was kind of great to like have a show there.
Hmm. Was Warhol one of those artists that you discovered early on that pulled you into art in a way?
Yeah, very much. I discovered him through the Velvet Underground, when I was 14 or something.
Hmm. Now that's interesting because it's another artist who one could say is a Trojan horse for a critique of consumerism, and it operates really well with that double speak, right?
Yeah, for sure.
You could easily coast along and rest on laurels, but I think, you continually try new forms and risk that and want to start over with something. And you seem to be unafraid of trying something new. What is that urge? And do you feel it ever ebbs, or do you feel it's been pretty continuous this whole time?
I don't know. I guess I'm kind of restless. I feel like I'm just always reaching for something, or like curious. Oh, what would this be like if you did that? Or I can't see doing the same kind of painting for my whole life.
Mm-hmm.
Not that there's anything wrong with that. It's just not who I am.
Right. And can you say anything about what you will be doing after these three major moments? Will you go back and start over again? Or is there something you want to try next that you're thinking about?
I don't know. I want to maybe get back to writing, doing some writing, and maybe that will lead to something. I'm kind of interested in doing like a one-act play. I've always liked that idea of combining performance with some ideas.
Mm-hmm. If you could, and actually, I'm sure you hopefully probably get the opportunity to tell a lot of young people what you think, but a painter, a musician, or any kind of artist who's starting out today, what would you tell them about what the most important thing is to hold on to as an artist?
I guess, your sense of yourself, I suppose.
Yeah, even as it changes.
Like even if you just have like a thread of an idea, to follow that thread and see where it goes.
Sense of self-trust, I guess, is really involved in that.
It's like artists are the most self-questioning people. So I don't know. Sometimes I think you have to have a little bit of delusion of grandeur to anything. Yeah, to have that moment of a confidence that makes you try something.
Mm-hmm. That's why I love artists. I mean, I think that you have to be a little bit crazy in a way, right? It's a special kind of state.
Yeah, it's can dance around that cliche, but there is something there.
Definitely something there. Well, thanks so much, Kim. It's been an absolute pleasure to talk to you today.
Thanks so much for asking me.
The Art Angle is produced by Sonia Menalili with contributions from myself, Ben Davis, Carolyn Goldstein, and Naomi Ryan. Thanks for listening, and see you next week.